In the remote northeast of South America lies an isolated island surrounded by the sea, where a strictly guarded penal colony is situated. From the late 19th to the mid-20th century, the French government chose this place as an exile for serious criminals and political prisoners. Due to the extremely harsh living conditions on the island, the mortality rate among the exiled prisoners was exceptionally high. Consequently, most of those incarcerated here harbored the desire to escape. And the story we are about to tell is a legendary, true escape story that took place on this island. The story begins in 1931 in Paris, France. The protagonist, Papillon, is a professional pickpocket entrenched in the underworld, who specialized in stealing assets for a gang boss. During one operation, Papillon secretly held back a few stolen diamonds, but was discovered by the boss's trusted henchman. In a fit of rage, the boss framed Papillon for a murder that he himself had committed. Papillon was consequently sentenced to life imprisonment, forced to spend the rest of his days in prison, and the place where he was to serve his sentence was that notorious penal colony. The moment the sentence was pronounced, Papillon resolved to escape. While awaiting transfer to the penal colony, Papillon befriended a fellow inmate named Julot, who also intended to escape and had done quite a bit of research. He told Papillon that to escape, they absolutely needed to prepare enough money to bribe the guards and buy a boat to leave the island. According to Julot, many wealthy prisoners, to facilitate bribery inside the prison, often used a specific method sealing large denomination banknotes and inserting them into their rectums to avoid police searches. Among the dozens of prisoners about to be sent to the penal colony was a skinny, bespectacled man named Louis Degas. Degas was a financial fraudster and a millionaire. Many prisoners were certain that Degas was hiding cash inside his body, and therefore everyone wanted to find an opportunity to kill him and take a portion of the money to fund their escape. Papillon, naturally, did not want to commit another murder, but Julot's words had given him an idea for making money. Not long after, Papillon and Julot, along with dozens of other prisoners, were escorted onto a ship bound for the penal colony. On the ship, Papillon quietly sought out Degas, honestly informing him that he was being watched by other inmates, and declared that he could guarantee his safety. The condition was that Degas had to pay him a fee. Unexpectedly, Degas completely disbelieved Papillon and immediately rejected the deal. He thought that even if someone had ill intentions towards him, the escorting police would not stand by and do nothing. However, Degas quickly realized his thinking was too naive that very night. A large, strong inmate took advantage of everyone being asleep, used a dinner knife to secretly stab a thin fellow prisoner to death, then slit the victim's abdomen and retrieved the cash hidden inside his body. The escorting police, wanting a share, chose to turn a blind eye. Degas, who had just witnessed the horrifying scene, was frozen with fear. Early the next morning, he proactively sought out the robust Papillon, hiring him as his personal bodyguard. Papillon happily agreed. That night, the strong inmate who had committed murder and theft the previous night targeted Degas again. Just as the man was about to attack Degas, Papillon rushed over in time and wrestled with him. Having grown up in the underworld, fighting was second nature to Papillon, so the large man was no match for him at all. He was quickly wrestled to the ground by Papillon and beaten severely, until the escorting police heard the commotion and ran over to separate the two. Although Papillon was punished with 1 day without food for this incident, the other inmates now knew that Degas had hired a capable fighter as a bodyguard, and no one dared to target him again. After many days at sea, the ship filled with prisoners finally reached the island penal colony. As soon as they entered the camp, the warden gathered them for an address. He declared that in every batch of prisoners who came here, there were always crazy ones who attempted to escape, but none had ever succeeded. Furthermore, if caught escaping the first time, they would be locked in a narrow, solitary confinement cell for 2 years. If caught a second time, they would be confined for 5 years, and then banished to another isolated island to live or die on their own. In addition, any inmate who killed a guard during an escape attempt would be immediately beheaded. Upon hearing the warden's threat, most prisoners immediately abandoned the idea of escaping. But there were still those determined to flee the island. One such determined person, Papillon, decided to persuade Louis Degas to escape with him. However, Degas firmly believed his wife and lawyer would find a way to rescue him from here, and thus refused Papillon's offer. That day, while doing outdoor forced labor, Papillon coincidentally saw a pimp accompanied by a group of prostitutes. He later heard from other inmates that because life on the island was so dull, every so often, the guards would allow an outside pimp to bring a few women to provide services. Papillon found an opportunity to talk to this pimp. The pimp finally agreed as long as Papillon paid 4,000 francs. He would sail him away from the island. However, the condition was that Papillon had to find a way to escape the prison and reach the dock on his own. Yet, before Papillon could even devise an escape plan, an unexpected incident occurred at the prison. That morning, the warden suddenly assembled all the prisoners at the execution ground. It turned out that Julot, the man Papillon had met earlier, had been recaptured after escaping. Furthermore, this man had also killed 2 guards during his attempted breakout. The warden immediately decided to publicly behead Julot as a deterrent. Many inmates confined here were convicted of the most serious murders, so they were quite accustomed to bloody scenes like this. Only the financial fraudster Degas was scared pale, his whole body trembling violently. Degas' condition immediately caught the warden's attention. The warden, understanding dark humor well, intentionally assigned Degas and Papillon to handle Julot's corpse together after the execution. Degas and Papillon had no choice but to carry the corpse to be buried on a nearby mountain. On the way, Degas saw blood continuously soaking through the cloth wrapping the body, and the fear in his heart grew stronger and stronger. Finally, he was so terrified that he froze rigid and stood motionless on the spot. The guarding soldier saw this, immediately pulled out a leather whip, and began to relentlessly lash Degas. Seeing his source of funding being beaten black and blue, Papillon lost his temper instinctively. He picked up a rock and brought it down hard on the guard's head. The guard immediately fell to the ground from the heavy blow and did not move again. Papillon was utterly panicked, realizing he had accidentally killed a guard. Without thinking, he quickly abandoned Julot's corpse and ran for his life towards the coast. This action was spotted by a few patrolling guards nearby. The guards immediately pursued Papillon while firing shots at him. To avoid the bullets, Papillon jumped into a river ahead and swam downstream. He eventually made a narrow escape, shaking off the guards. But to leave the island, he needed a boat. Papillon took advantage of the night to reach the dock, meeting the pimp he had made a verbal agreement with earlier. However, in his haste, Papillon had not had time to get the money from Degas. Now, he could only beg the pimp to take him off the island first, and he would pay upon reaching Paris. Unexpectedly, the pimp cheerfully agreed to his request. Little did he know, just as Papillon was joyfully preparing to board the boat, a few guards suddenly appeared and arrested him, bringing him back to the prison. It turned out that the pimp had long been bribed by the warden and fundamentally could not help any inmate escape from here. Even if Papillon had brought the cash, he probably still would have been caught. Papillon was quickly brought before the warden. Fortunately, the guard he had struck with the rock was not dead, only unconscious. Therefore, the warden did not immediately behead Papillon, but very politely decided to confine him to solitary for 2 years. Papillon tried to justify himself to the warden, claiming he had never committed murder and was only brought here because he was framed by the gang boss. Thus, his escape attempt was merely an effort to regain the freedom that rightfully belonged to him. The warden completely disregarded Papillon's defense and said to him with an implied meaning, "Perhaps you truly haven't killed anyone, but you have committed a great crime. Your crime is having wasted your life. For this, you must pay the price." The warden's words made Papillon stand frozen on the spot. Before he could recover, he was thrown into solitary confinement by the warden's subordinates. The solitary confinement cell was a small, dark room less than 4 square meters. Papillon was forced to endure his time here for 2 years. During his time locked in the dark room, Papillon could only sleep on a stiff wooden plank every night. Each meal consisted only of a little vegetable porridge, barely enough to line his stomach. The guard he had knocked out earlier, seeking revenge, frequently came to punch and kick him to massage his bones. Papillon could still endure the lack of food and the physical torture. What distressed him most was that during solitary confinement, He was not allowed to speak to anyone. Papillon could only use his fingers to count the days passing by. 2 months later, one day, he was surprised to find that in the food bucket brought by the guard, besides the unchanging vegetable porridge, there was half a coconut and a small piece of paper. On the paper, a sentence was written, "From now on, you will receive half a coconut every day. Keep going, my friend." Although there was no signature, Papillon guessed the coconut must have been sent by Dega, who had bribed the guard to send him extra food. This half coconut, along with Dega's kindness, reignited Papillon's fighting spirit to escape this place. He had been constantly thinking about the warden's words, if wasting his life was truly his crime. Then 2 years in solitary confinement was enough for him to atone. In the coming days, he hoped to escape this prison and start a more meaningful life. To that end, Papillon began physical training to prepare for a future breakout. However, good things do not last. Not long after, during a patrol, the warden accidentally discovered the coconut hidden in the food bucket. The bribed guard was even beaten to death by the warden in a fit of rage. The warden then questioned Papillon about who had bribed the guard to deliver him half a coconut every day. Papillon did not want to betray his kind friend and chose to remain silent. This attitude only further enraged the warden. As punishment, the warden immediately cut Papillon's daily food ration in half. 3 months later, due to prolonged starvation, Papillon became skin and bones, looking as if he could die at any moment. Just when he was nearly desperate, the warden suddenly appeared before him with a bowl of steaming hot meat soup. He declared that if Papillon agreed to expose the accomplice who provided the coconut, he would be given this delicious soup every day. Papillon managed to suppress his hunger and ultimately still refused to betray Dega, to continue forcing Papillon into submission. The warden had the guards cover the ceiling window of the solitary cell. The room holding Papillon became a true dark chamber, devoid of light and sound. Staying in such a prolonged environment without sound or light, Papillon's mental state gradually collapsed, and he even experienced severe hallucinations. Despite this, he endured steadfastly and did not expose Dega. Finally, in this extremely harsh environment, Papillon survived 2 full years. When he was released from the dark room, he was barely clinging to his last breath. Even walking required the guard's assistance. Therefore, he was sent to the infirmary for treatment. After a period of recuperation, Papillon's health gradually recovered, but his mind seemed to have severe issues. He became completely dull and foolish. Upon hearing the news, Dega rushed to the infirmary to visit Papillon. By this time, Dega had used his professional financial knowledge to become the warden's personal asset management advisor. Thanks to the warden's trust, he was allowed free access to any area outside the solitary confinement section. Dega was extremely grateful that Papillon had never betrayed him. Hearing Dega's thanks, the previously dull Papillon suddenly regained his mental clarity. He whispered to Dega that he was actually faking insanity. The purpose, naturally, was to deceive the guards and medical staff to find an opportunity to escape. Hearing this, Dega's worry turned into overwhelming joy. He also told Papillon that in 2 nights, the warden would arrange for the guards and inmates to watch a movie. That would be the best time to escape, as the sound of the movie would cover the noise made during the breakout. And this time, Dega decided to escape with Papillon. It turned out that Dega's wife had long been having an affair with his lawyer. Everything they had said about finding a way to rescue Dega from here was a lie. Dega had only recently stumbled upon their relationship, which is why he decided to escape with Papillon, to ensure a successful escape. Papillon convinced 2 other inmates to join his and Dega's plan. Both were Papillon's fellow patients, one named Soai and the other Uncle Ho. A male guard responsible for watching the patients in the infirmary constantly desired Soai's appearance and wanted to have sex with him. Soai's task was to seduce the male guard to steal the infirmary key. As for Uncle Ho, he knew the island's fishermen and was capable of buying a boat to leave the island. 2 days later, on the day of action, Soai lured the male guard into the restroom first, then Papillon and Uncle Ho followed, finding an opportunity to knock the guard unconscious. They then stole the key from him and escaped the infirmary. Simultaneously, Louis Dega used the warden's name to request a bottle of wine from the kitchen. He then added the sleeping pills he had already bought from the infirmary to the wine. Finally, he shared the drugged wine with the guards manning the prison gate, falsely claiming the warden had invited them to drink. After drinking the drugged wine, the guards quickly fell into a deep sleep. Dega seized this opportunity to take the prison gate key from them, and together with Papillon and the other two who arrived shortly after, they escaped the prison. The four successfully bought a fishing boat from a fisherman. However, the quality of the boat was poor. They hadn't rowed far before the hull began to fail and leak water. Seeing that the four were about to sink, Uncle Ho, in a moment of warped loyalty, suggested throwing Dega overboard to reduce the boat's weight. In Uncle Ho's eyes, Dega was the weakest of the four, and he had accidentally broken his leg while escaping the prison, making him a burden. Papillon had long regarded Dega as his most reliable friend, and of course, he refused to sacrifice him to protect Dega. He wrestled with Uncle Ho. He was overpowered, and Uncle Ho tightly gripped his throat, nearly choking him to death. In this critical moment, Dega pulled out a dinner knife he had stolen for self-defense and decisively stabbed Uncle Ho from behind. After catching his breath, Papillon threw Uncle Ho's body into the sea. Thanks to the timely reduction in weight, the boat's leaking situation improved. Unexpectedly, at that very moment, a huge storm suddenly struck. The boat shook violently. Before long, all three men on the boat were stunned and passed out. When the three woke up, they found they had been rescued by some passing nuns and taken to another island before they could even celebrate. They saw a group of pursuing guards arrive. It turned out the nuns recognized the three as prisoners and had reported them to the penal colony. Faced with the fierce guards, So tried to run but was shot dead on the spot. Papillon and Dega chose to surrender. Since this was Papillon's second escape attempt, he was sentenced to 5 years in solitary confinement. Dega, however, was taken directly by the warden to the isolated island, where he would have to fend for himself. The warden believed Dega had betrayed his trust and therefore deserved the harshest punishment. Time flew by, and the long 5 years finally ended. By now, Papillon's hair was gray. He seemed to have aged 50 years. But the warden's torment did not stop there. After being released from solitary confinement, Papillon was taken to the island where Dega was located. This place is called Devil's Island. There are no guards on the island and no surrounding walls, because the island itself is a prison with no way out. Devil's Island is surrounded on all sides by sheer cliffs, and beneath the seawater lurk ferocious sharks, constantly waiting to devour any living creature that falls in. Most prisoners exiled here are driven mad by months of hopeless despair not long after their arrival. What provided Papillon with some comfort was that his old friend, despite being trapped on Devil's Island for 5 years, had managed to maintain his sanity. Despite facing this desperate situation, Papillon still did not give up on escaping. Every day, he went to the coast to observe the tide to find a way to break free. Finally, one day, Papillon discovered the pattern of the tide. He excitedly told Dega that by just making a simple small raft and paddling at the right time, they could drift to the mainland using the ocean current. However, during this process, they would need some luck to avoid the deadly waves that could smash them against the cliffs and the bloodthirsty sharks. Dega was inspired by Papillon's optimism and decided to help him build the raft. The two then found 2 large sacks and many dry coconuts. They stuffed the dry coconuts into the sacks to form 2 simple small rafts. Then they dragged the rafts to the coast. Just as everything was ready, Dega suddenly told Papillon that he had grown accustomed to life on Devil's Island and no longer wanted to leave. Papillon was stunned for a moment. He didn't know if Dega chose to stay because he truly got used to life here, or if he was afraid of becoming a burden to him, or if he had simply lost the courage for risk and resistance during his prolonged captivity. However, to Papillon, the reason no longer mattered. As a kindred spirit and friend, he decided to respect Dega's choice. Therefore, Papillon said little, just gave Dega a hug, then took his small raft and jumped into the sea. Fortunately, he was neither killed by waves smashing him against the cliff nor encountered any sharks. Just like that, Papillon lay on the coconut raft, being gradually pushed further away by the ocean current, watching his close friend disappear. Dega felt a genuine sense of contentment in his heart. Many years later, an elderly Papillon brought a book manuscript to a publisher, hoping to publish an autobiographical novel. After reviewing the manuscript, the publisher was utterly shocked. He found it difficult to believe that the content of the book was a real-life experience of one person. Papillon solemnly told the publisher that this was indeed not the exclusive memory of one person, but the collective history of resistance of a group of people who never bowed before despair. This week's story is an excerpt from the highly rated crime film Papillon, released in 2017, a remake of the 1973 film of the same name. The original work was adapted from the true story of the real-life figure named Henri Charrière. It is said that what Henri experienced in real life was even more thrilling and captivating than the plot of the movie. Notably, the 2017 version of Papillon received as much praise upon its release as the original, because it was adapted from a true story. The film did not exaggerate the escape methods and was filmed quite realistically. This is precisely the valuable point of this film. Furthermore, the novel The Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King, which was later adapted into a cinematic masterpiece, seems to have been inspired by the 1973 version of Papillon and Henri Charrière's personal experiences. The value of a film lies in its reputation, and the value of a film review lies in the feeling it evokes. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. How do you feel about this movie? Please comment below.